Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Thank you for joining this webinar focused on how international development donors and other supporters can ensure that nature-based solutions programming appropriately integrates gender equality considerations and gender-responsive strategies into planning, implementation, and management. In the context of this being a DCED event with a focus on private sector participation in enterprise development, we also hope to look at how best to support women entrepreneurs and women-led businesses in taking advantage of market opportunities linked to nature-based solutions. My name is Carrie Max, and I am the Deputy Director of Partnering for Climate, a Government of Canada-funded initiative that brings together Canadian and African civil society organizations, academics, the private sector, Indigenous peoples, and local communities to help design and deliver locally led nature-based solutions that increase resiliency in the face of climate change and biodiversity loss. I'm speaking to you from Ottawa, Canada, located on the traditional unceded and unsurrendered territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin people. The Algonquin people have inhabited and cared for these lands since time immemorial, and I take this time to express our gratitude and respect to them and to the land for all that it has provided. Canada has the privilege of being a member of the Donor Committee on Enterprise Development, DCED, a forum for learning about the most effective ways to create inclusive and resilient economic opportunities in developing countries, in line with the Sustainable Development Goals and based on practical experiences in private sector development. DCED brings together donors through working groups on market systems, development, private sector engagement, business environment, results measurement, women's economic empowerment, and green growth. These groups enable like-minded donors to share information, support each other's efforts, and develop knowledge-sharing tools. The toolkit we are presenting today was championed by the Green Growth Working Group, where a subset of donors has come together to help promote private sector development that responds to the challenges and opportunities of mitigating and adapting to climate change, promoting environmental sustainability, and countering biodiversity loss. In early 2021, Canada suggested to the group that there were promising opportunities to promote linkages between efforts to address climate change adaptation and mitigation, and economic, social, and cultural benefits from nature-based solutions like forests, mangroves, seaweed and seagrass, conservation and regenerative agriculture, and ecotourism, to name a few. As a reflection of the importance of natural resources to rural women, Canada recommended that the DCED fund a study on the links between climate change adaptation and nature-based solutions, with a focus on supporting women in this space. A subgroup of other donors, including Germany, the United States, the UNDP, ITC, ILO, and UNIDO, supported this idea and helped develop terms of reference that led in 2023 to the contracting of ARUP and Social Development Direct. With guidance from the Green Growth Working Group and support from the DCED Secretariat, ARUP and Social Development Direct embraced the challenge of developing this toolkit. And that is where we will begin our webinar today, with a presentation of the toolkit by Sara Candiraci, an Associate Director in ARUP's Cities, Planning and Design team, and Global Leader for Social Value and Equity. Sara has extensive experience in gender-responsive urban planning and international development. After Sara's presentation, we will invite our panelists to share their perspectives on the toolkit and on how best to support women in the nature-based solutions sector. We'll begin with Kezia Ojal, a community associate at the Kunkui Design Initiative, KDI, in Kenya, where she applies her experiences in community engagement and community organization development to KDI's mission to support local residents in under-resourced communities to make the most of the social, economic, and environmental potential of their neighborhoods and cities. Following Kezia, we'll hear from Larissa Heinisch, a senior climate change consultant with ARUP, whose technical expertise in climate resilience applied to the built environment, sustainability, and nature-based solutions has helped shape the toolkit and its recommendations. Larissa will be followed by Social Development Direct's Rebecca Martin, SDD's Climate Justice Lead, and a Senior Technical Specialist with a focus on governance and inclusive societies. To learn more about our panelists, please read the biographies that were included with the invitation. We will do 2 rounds of questions with the panel, and we will then turn to you in our audience for your views and your questions. Please introduce yourselves in the Zoom chat box if you haven't already done so, and feel free to enter any questions you may have throughout the session, but please use the Q&A box. So with that, Sarah, I'll turn to you.
Thank you, Kerry, for the great introduction, and thanks everyone for joining this webinar. I'm going to share my screen because there is a presentation that we put together to take you through the toolkit. Please let me know if you can see my screen. Yeah, all good. Okay, so yeah, so as Kerry said, I'm Sara Candiracci. I'm an urban planner and social scientist. I work with ARO, which is a international collective of urban planners, designers, a global collective of urban planners, designers, engineers. We work across the built and natural environment. And at ARO, I'm leading the work on social impact. And for this project, being the project director. So as Kerry said, I'm going to take you through, give you like an overview of the toolkit, which we developed over the past couple of years. So so the toolkit, yeah, was developed by ARUP with Social Development Direct. We have here Rebecca with us, but of course with the Green Growth Working Group of DCED. The way it was done, we undertook a very comprehensive desk-based research, but also it has been shaped by the active engagement of a wide range of stakeholders. We try to include practitioners, private sector, women-led organization, and also the academia, and also international organization, because we wanted to ensure to reflect different lived experience and perspective in relation to gender and nature-based solutions. So it was developed also with the support of a technical advisory group. Kerry already mentioned some of the members of this group, which have been working with us through the development of the toolkit, which include the World Bank, GIZ, UNESCAP, Global Affairs Canada, UNDP, ILO, and others. And so this collective expertise and also different background of the people involved in developing this toolkit was actually intentional, because we wanted to really shape something that hopefully is relevant, is effective and practical enough to be used across the industry. So why a toolkit? So basically, we decided to develop it to fill a gap that was identified in the NBS, in the nature-based solutions sector. Because as we all know, the nature-based solutions have great potential to address climate change, biodiversity loss, and also sustainable development. Their impact is often limited because gender and social considerations are often overlooked by practitioners, investors, and developers. So by developing this toolkit, we wanted to ensure that basically everyone, especially women, can participate, lead, and also benefit equally from nature-based solutions initiatives. And the toolkit that you can download from this QR code is available online, it's public source. Provides practical guidance and also tools that you can download from the toolkit, which really the idea to help practitioners, policymakers, and businesses to integrate gender considerations across the life cycle of their work, from planning, management, and operation. So the toolkit is organized in 4 sections, and each serve a specific purpose to support the creation of gender-responsive MBS. In the first section introduce key concepts, clarify terminology, and also emphasize the benefit of effectively implemented MBS. The second section explore the impact of climate change and environmental degradation on women, and highlights the role and contribution that women play in nature-based solutions. Also, in these sections, we outline the economic, social, cultural, and environmental benefits of gender-responsive MBS. In the third section, actually, the third section is the core of the toolkit, because it provides practical guidance, steps, and also resources to address the key barriers that we identify and that actually create, and also the solution that you can adopt to create gender responsive MBS. And finally, the first and last section basically summarize the toolkit, key findings, and also includes a catalog of MBS practical solutions and ideas. And there are also different case studies and additional resources for deeper exploration. As I said, I'm not, as I have a limited time, I'm going to give you like a quick overview of the different sections with the key highlights from each of them. So let's start with the definition, how we are defining nature-based solutions. First of all, as we all know, this is not, this is not a new idea. People have been using nature for generations to support their lives and also to support their communities. What actually is new is that there is a growing global recognition of nature-based solution as a smart alternative to traditional approaches. They're now seen as a powerful tool to manage land, water, and nature resources, and also to tackle issues in both cities and rural areas. But what we saw in our research is that there is often confusion around what is nature-based solutions. There are different experts using different definition, which can make it a bit unclear and sometimes even lead to solutions that are not actually nature-based solutions because they're not helping people or nature. And also based on our interview, we also learned that the term nature-based solution isn't always well known or easily understood at local level, particularly with women-led groups. So it's very important, but still through their work, they're actually doing nature-based solutions. So it's very important not to be too technical, to be very clear what it is, and also to be clear in how to deliver such a nature-based solution. At the same time, when working with community groups at local level, in particular in low-income countries, it's very important to use a language that resonates with them and that is and not rely too much on technical terms. But just to conclude on that, basically what we decided to do, we decided to use the International Union of Conservation of Nature definition of nature-based solution that basically consider nature-based solutions as actions to protect, sustainably manage, and restore natural and modify ecosystem, addressing social challenges and that create basically benefits for the well-being and biodiversity as a whole. So when nature-based solutions are implemented in the right way, they can create multiple benefits. In fact, nature-based solution can strengthen the ability of communities and ecosystems to cope with extreme weather events, such as floods, storms, or drought. Also, health ecosystem managed through nature-based solution can improve water quality and also can support sustainable agriculture, so can help ensure reliable access to clean water and food. And also nature-based solution provide a more sustainable and cost-effective alternative to traditional green infrastructure, so addressing multiple challenges at once. There are other benefits. For instance, by protecting, conserving, and restoring ecosystems, nature-based solution can help preserve and enhance biodiversity. Also, nature-based solution purify water, manage stormwater, and restore natural hydrological cycles, so resulting in healthier water bodies and greater water security. And also, finally, by improving air, water quality, and also providing better access to green spaces, nature-based solutions has great benefit for people, physical and mental health and well-being, so contributing to quality of life. So, but these are some of the benefits of nature-based solution. And the moment we integrate gender consideration in the way we design them, actually we are generating even more. And I'm going to take you through them in a bit. So, but why basically toolkit is looking not only at nature-based solution, we are looking at the nexus between, at the link between nature-based solutions and women. And why this? Because we know that women are often hit the hardest by climate change and also by environmental degradation. And these challenges tend to make existing inequalities even worse, affecting women's income, their health, education, access to food, and also the wider community. Here you can see some numbers, like, for example, around 80% of people displaced by climate-related disasters are women. So that's why it's important to focus on women, but not just because of the barriers they face, the challenges that they have to face, but also because women have deep knowledge and also leadership skills that are so important to make nature-based solutions more inclusive, just, and effective. So now let's see some of the barriers that women normally face that are limiting the ability to benefit from or to lead also nature-based solutions. First of all, they often don't have access to land or resources. Compared to men, women are far less likely to own or to control land, which makes it harder for them to take part in environmental initiatives. Second, they carry a heavy load of unpaid care work. Compared to men, women and girls spend much more time in caring for children, the elderly, and also managing the home. And third, women are often excluded from decision making. They're not given a seat at the table when it comes to managing land, water, or natural resources, even if this decision actually have an impact on their daily life. Other challenges they're facing are, for instance, access to finance, which is a big challenge because women are less likely than men to have bank account, get a loan, or buy insurance. Also, there are gender norms and discrimination that still shape what women are expected to do. So in many places and cultures, there are there are different beliefs that limit women's role and opportunities. And then third, women often lack strong support network, including professional or community networks that offer mentorship, information, or partnership. So resources which are critical for getting involved in environmental work. But even if these so many challenge, women are also they play a key role when it's come to nature-based solution because they manage natural resources at home and in their community. Also, they have a deep knowledge of local environment and are well connected through social network. In particular, when related to all these skills to nature-based solutions, what women normally contribute is about managing land, it supports sustainable livelihood and food security. It helps preserve biodiversity and adapt to climate change, and also quite important is also the capacity to pass on traditional knowledge and values about nature. But even if their contribution are essential, women roles are often overlooked or undervalued, especially in economic terms. So it's very important to break down the existing barriers to really understand how to find solution, to identify the intervention points, to really change these ecosystems or narrative, so that we give women a role in designing, implementing nature-based solution. So to break down all this challenge, what we did in our research is to develop a theory of change, which was basically at the core of our work. And through our analysis, I know I'm conscious here there is a lot of information. I'm going to take you through the key main barriers that we identify through our research, which are barriers at both global, national, and local level. First of all, there is gender blind or unequal policies and regulatory framework. There is a gap in relation to evidence and advocacy. And also there is limited women empowerment and participation. And also another barrier that we identify is limited access to finance, economic implementation constraint. So looking more closely at these barriers, when we talk about gender blind policies and regulation, we mean that gender and women priorities are often missing from NBS policies and frameworks. Also, there is a lack of robust evidence and advocacy on the benefits of gender responsive approaches in NBS. And this is mainly due to lack or insufficient data collection. There are weak evaluation mechanisms and also limited awareness. In fact, only few countries report gender disaggregated data in SDG reviews, which of course, all this lack of data in gender disaggregated data are limiting advocacy. Another barrier is the limited women's empowerment participation. As we said, women engagement is restricted by discriminatory social norms, limited access to information, and also lack of representation decision making. And the last one, the last key barrier that was identified is the limited access to finance resources and business opportunities. I'm sorry, I just realized that maybe that was off. I'm sorry. So in addition, so in our theory of change, we also identify four main areas of action to ensure that nature-based solutions are not only effective in addressing environmental issues, but also in advancing gender equity and social inclusion. And this theory of change, you can find it in the toolkit. So looking at this intervention area in more detail, so these are four, and I'm going to take you through the four of them right now. So the first one is about the development of gender-responsive MBS policies and regulations. And this can be done by including gender in policy design, so making sure also to consult women and marginalized groups and also include their priorities. It's very important also to establish quotas or targets for women participation in MBS committees or leadership role, and also collect gender disaggregated data to show how MBS projects impact women and men differently. And this is so important to inform better policy and decisions. Sorry, there are too many buttons. So, so the second action area is about strengthening evidence and advocacy for gender responsive MBS. So it's very important to develop gender responsive monitoring evaluation mechanisms so that we are able to track how nature-based solutions impact women and men differently, and use this information to improve projects and policies. It's also important to focus on developing advocacy strategies for gender responsive MBS, and also expand educational and training opportunities which are focusing on gender responsive MBS, on also leadership skills, and this training should be able to and women and also local practitioners and policymakers should benefit from this training at national level, but at the same at local level. This should be also benefit practitioners working on the field, and also women so that they can be empowered to deliver their work. And talking about women empowerment, so as we said, they need to participate meaningfully in planning, design, and implementing nature-based solutions. And to achieve this, it's very important to have a systemic approach. So first of all, it's very important to be very proactive and active in promoting their representation decision-making. It's very important to address social norms and barriers. So identify, so that the challenge that we identify, like social norms, are overcome. And also it's very important to value and integrate indigenous knowledge and traditional practice. And the last area of action is focusing on finance. So to ensure that women have access to finance opportunity, it's very important to have dedicated funding and incentive mechanisms that are focusing on women and focusing on women working on nature-based solutions. It's also important to equip them with the right skills to not only implement, but also to manage business. So it's very important to design capacity building and financial support programs for women. And also measuring is important, measuring, and also collecting disaggregated data. And because only by measuring the impact of the work is possible to communicate the impact broadly and to influence decisions. And then also what we saw that is very important to embed this approach across the life cycle of nature-based solutions initiatives. So that's why we also designed this kind of roadmap, because sometimes what we saw is that maybe gender considerations are taken into account too late in the cycle, while if we really want to design effective and real gender responsive nature-based solution, this consideration might start upfront. So it's very important we identify here four key stages, no, 6 key stages, which are linked to the NBS project life cycle, starting from stage 1, which is engagement and empowerment. So it's very important to ensure the meaningful participation of women in decision making. And then it's very important to also assess and understand the context. So also in this, when analyzing data and understanding the baseline of the situation, also there is very important to involve women and underrepresented groups to understand lived experience. And also during the planning design phase, this has to be informed by the assessment. And then also during the implementation, is very important to involve the women and also to build their capacity to be able to properly also manage and operate, also to operationalize the intervention afterward. Monitor evaluation, as I said before, is critical. The use of gender diversity data and also the use of community groups to collect data, to monitor and to report, because that's also another way for empowering them. And then management and scaling is also, of course, a key element of the nature-based solution project life cycle, because it ensures the long-term support and sustainability of the initiative in the long term. So if all this is implemented in the right way, so we saw that creates a number of benefits that goes beyond those that we saw before. So there are, of course, economic benefits, social, cultural benefits, environmental benefits, because the moment we involve women, it's possible to ensure long-term economic sustainability, to increase productivity and innovation, and also to make flourish a diverse type of nature-based economy. At the same time, by engaging women, involving women, it's possible to enhance social equity and inclusivity, to improve health and well-being, and also to enhance community resilience, knowing the critical role that women, in particular in low-income countries, play at community level. And finally, in relation to the environment, of course, this increase the benefit for the healthy environment, in particular, taking into consideration the specific needs of women in relation to health and well-being, and also, of course, biodiversity conservation, consider the knowledge they have in relation to traditional knowledge in relation to nature, and of course, climate resilience. And then as I said, the toolkit also includes a number of case studies, because we found them so important to ground the toolkit into the real world, into the reality, and because it's the way for really showing the impact, the positive impact that existing gender response in nature-based solutions that have been implemented across the globe actually have in improving the well-being of women, improving the well-being of communities, at the same time creating economic opportunities for everyone, and of course creating better conditions for nature and the environment. And to conclude, I'd like to thank DCED for this great opportunity. This is the key team members who participated in the project. It's been an interesting journey. We learned a lot. We hope that we managed to also share with you our knowledge. But as I said, this has been a collective effort which involved many people from different organizations. I think that is what makes this toolkit hopefully useful and very practical and effective. So I will stop here. So thank you very much. I'm happy to reply to any question.
Thank you, Sarah, and we'll come back to the questions following the panel. So you'll have all seen this was really a whirlwind tour of what's contained in the toolkit. The toolkit has something for everyone. It's got phenomenal insights. I would strongly encourage you, when you have a moment, to take a look at it and peruse through it. But we'll go from that broad introduction to asking our practitioners, asking our experts if they can share a little bit on their perspective. So Kezia, starting with you, from your experience as a community associate supporting women-led businesses and other community organizations in this field, is there anything that you found particularly relevant in terms of what the toolkit emphasizes? And is there also anything that you found that was missed that you would like to highlight? Thanks.
Thank you, Kerry. My name is Kezia Ojal, a community associate at KDI. My background is community development and social work, and I'm involved in community engagement in the various projects that KDI does. Most of them are nature-based related projects in Nairobi and in other cities in East Africa. So in relation to that question, first of all, just to say good job to Sarah and the team for all the work that you've done on this toolkit. I'm really excited as I read through the toolkit, but also as just present a summary of the toolkit. It's really exciting because it's really a presentation of what we see in our work. It's really a presentation of even the current projects we are currently undertaking in the cities. And what stood out for me the most is economic empowerment of women. I think an issue we had when you were starting to implement NBS solutions was how do you attach livelihoods to NBS? And through the years, as you continue to implement, we've realized that the communities will always ask you what is in need for us, because the communities sometimes do not just see the benefit of nature easily, but what is the benefit that easily comes for them, or that they see as most important, is something attached to their livelihoods. Because in the city especially, people are here to look for jobs, people are here to meet their economical needs. So in everything that they do, there's always that something they're looking for is how does it meet my economical need as a person living in the city, and especially women who are really involved in NBS initiatives. How do they generate income through that? So I think that really stood out for me. And another one is decision making for women in nature-based solutions, because you realize that women mostly are undertaking nature-based solutions even at the household level, and it somehow appears like it's a natural role for women to take care of nature, because if they don't take care of it, then it interferes with a lot that goes around them, and this makes their life difficult. So it means naturally the women are taking care of nature, and sometimes they don't see this as something really big, because they feel like it's something normal in their lives, so they don't see it as something big. And this happens even when you work with community groups and initiatives. You see that women play a major role, but when it comes to decision making about the group, the women are behind. For example, when you visit a community group that are engaging nature in solving their challenges, or are doing nature-based solutions, and you want to have a conversation, the person who the group will present in most cases is the man. And that shows you that the woman doesn't have a decision-making role. So I think that's something that I was excited to see highlighted amongst many other things that have been excited. And another thing that I feel like it's really important, and with this toolkit can help, is how do we showcase the work that the women groups are doing with regards to nature. For example, I'll use Nairobi as an example. There are very many community groups who are doing nature-based solutions, engaging nature in solving the challenges they are facing. But then when it comes to, for example, the groups that have an upper hand, meet dignitaries, meet the president, you don't see women who are part of this. But when you go to the ground, you find that the women are doing a lot of it. So somehow their work is not being showcased, or they're not being recognized for the work they're doing. And I think that's something that needs to be really highlighted. And this is in line to access to resources. I'd say that also limits the access to resources, because if they're not recognized, if they're not, their hands are not held in the process of, for example, resource flow, the resource will obviously always flow to the groups that the men are the majority. So how do we ensure we highlight the work that women are doing, so that resources can also trickle down to the groups of women? I think that's all for me at this point with regards to that question. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, Kezia. That was fantastic. In terms of your point of telling the story, we hope to come back there, because in part this toolkit was developed, and this event and our efforts to get the message out is really trying to shine a spotlight on the role of women in particular in the stewardship of resources that are essential and underpin the economic, social, and cultural health of communities. And I found your point about the livelihood link very, very telling. It was anchored in our particular initiative. We knew that if communities were going to get involved in nature-based solutions where there was potential competition for those resources, they needed to make sure that they were earning sufficient income from that involvement to protect those resources from alternative claims or from their own claims. The option of cutting down a tree versus maintaining it. So thank you for that. And Larissa, I'll come to you now. The toolkit actually makes a reference to the IUCN Global Nature-Based Solutions Standard. And I was struck when Sarah presented the different elements for ensuring the integration of gender equality considerations through the nature-based solutions life cycle. the alignment with those standards in terms of participation, free, prior, informed consent, looking at trade-offs and the like. So from your experience in implementing nature-based solutions, what do you see as the most practical strategies for ensuring that that local knowledge, especially women's traditional ecological knowledge, is meaningfully integrated into efforts to support women-led enterprises and other organizations linked to nature-based solutions?
Perfect. Thank you, Carrie. And also thank you again for the invite to join this extremely relevant discussion. As a woman working in the interface between nature and climate, it's really an honor to be here today with my panel colleagues. And thank you everyone for joining today. So ensuring local knowledge is meaningfully integrated is a critical point. And I'll highlight 3 key practical strategies we can have in mind. I think one of the most effective strategies is co-designing nature-based solutions with local women's groups and doing that from the outset. So including women not just as participants, but really as co-creators. And what that means in practice is engaging them in early stage assessments. So by using participatory tools, and the toolkit recommends actually some examples of these tools that can be applied, such as gender responsive social impact assessments. And tools like these ones help really to surface the nuanced ways women interact with ecosystems, which is a knowledge that often goes unrecognized in top-down planning. A second key practical strategy is to make a conscious effort to use language and communication approaches that resonates locally. And Sarah mentioned that, already mentioned this earlier in her introductory presentation. So even the term nature-based solutions might not be so usual, familiar, or even meaningful in our contexts we work on. But practice within these realms often already exist under different names. So it's very important to recognize that. Also important to consider the relation different communities have with nature. For example, indigenous peoples and traditional local communities tend to perceive the value of nature much closer to a cosmovision and to even a spiritual connection. So recognizing and validating this practice and perspectives firstly builds trust and ensure that these interventions are not only technically sound, but also culturally embedded. And just as an example, I have previously worked with setting climate and biodiversity plans in cities in Brazil, where I'm originally from. And we were applying all these different range of jargons and complex definitions that work within climate and biodiversity action in Compass. So talking about ecosystem service, climate exposure, vulnerability, and so on. And we rapidly understood that that approach wouldn't work. And I have a background in architecture and urban planning, so I really enjoy using graphic tools to communicate complex definitions. So we start to co-develop a physical map and using photos and images to base the discussion around challenges and opportunities and to identify these spatially. And worked quite well because in the conversation moved towards what were the development pressures on the ground, the economic opportunities, and how preserving or promoting nature could contribute. And my last, but not least point, the third one, is to build partnerships with local women leaders and elders. And by partnering with those who really hold the traditional ecological knowledge, which can be transformative because their insights can have inputs into seasonal water management, and so on, often leading to more resilient and adapted solutions. And it's not just about listening, but also really integrating that in the way we structure projects. So this knowledge shapes the decisions, the budgets, and the outcomes. So recapping the 3 strategies I mentioned. So co-design with women from the outside as co-creators, use language that resonate locally, and partner with local women leaders. And I'll invite you to read and refer to the toolkit for further examples.
Thank you very much, Larissa. And those are really, really very, very practical and make the difference not only for integrating women, but also for the success of the ultimate nature-based solutions being being driven, since women, one way or another, will have a very important role there. So it's a great win-win for the community. Let me turn now to Rebecca. Rebecca, Kezia emphasized the importance of making the links to livelihoods, the importance of access to resources for women, and decision making, all key elements to success of inclusive gender responses across the board. So in that context, what's your sense of sort of the most important takeaways or elements of the toolkit that people in the audience who may want to really drill down into these areas and deliver on these very important objectives should maybe take a look at?
Thank you, Kerry, and thank you to all of the panelists. I'm really pleased to join this webinar as one of the authors that's been working on this piece for the last couple of years, from Social Development Director, a social enterprise consultancy focusing on gender equality, disability and social inclusion. So when it comes to some of the areas that we can be working on as members of this webinar, we identified some of the key challenges that women face in nature-based enterprise development and some of the solutions that we can be working on to overcome them. And as you and Kezia mentioned, we see that many of these are common challenges with women's economic empowerment in general, as well as some being specific barriers relating to nature-based solutions and climate actions. So as Sarah mentioned, we identified 4 main barriers in the toolkit. The first being around gender unaware or unequal policies and regulatory frameworks. So we found that existing literature and policies often don't consider gender, social inclusion and intersectionality, which means that the needs and contributions of women, Indigenous people, people with disabilities and people from other excluded groups are not presented, they're not considered, and they're not planned for, which can create barriers. So one of the ways we can counter that is to make sure that our data collection and our research does reflect this the need for this data. We also found that where DCED was reflected in some of the national and international policies, there were challenges in reflecting that in implementation, as people were still unaware of the links or the key actions they could take. So to address that, we need to be looking at raising the capacities of not just the policymakers, but also the people implementing this work, so they understand the importance and benefits of women-led nature-based solutions. The second challenge we identified was around evidence and advocacy gaps. So whilst there's growing recognition of the importance of gender-responsive nature-based solutions, the evidence base on the benefits of those approaches is still being built. We see the lack of DCED disaggregated data that Sarah referred to, the lack of evaluations of projects that make it challenging to understand what the impacts of these projects are on women and socially excluded groups, and to learn from the successes and challenges, which in turn creates problems for advocacy and supporting projects to better mainstream DCED in their work, because we know people often respond well to examples of how gender can be mainstreamed in practice. So reports and guidance like this toolkit will contribute towards addressing that barrier. The third barrier was around women's economic empowerment and participation, and both Larissa and Kezia have also spoken to this, where we see that women face systemic barriers in such as gender-based violence, unpaid care responsibility, and unequal access to land ownership, to resourcing and to decision-making opportunities. And these barriers are deeply rooted in discriminatory socioeconomic and cultural norms, and in limited consideration and value placed on traditional, Indigenous and women's knowledge. So we see that despite progress, women continue to be underrepresented in decision-making processes at global, national and subnational levels, and at organisational levels. Power imbalances marginalise women's participation and prioritise male voices, particularly in leadership and technical roles, which emphasises the importance of taking a holistic approach that also includes efforts to address discriminatory social norms and focus on more inclusive and representative decision making. And then the final barrier we identified was finance, economic and implementation constraints, which includes barriers to financial resources and business opportunities. We see that women, particularly in the Global South, face compounded challenges due to socioeconomic and cultural norms that restrict their financial autonomy and participation in economic activities, face barriers like limited access to capital, insufficient technical support, and a lack of networks to navigate financing opportunities, whereas male-led businesses often have more access to traditional financial institutions and resources. And the toolkit also contains recommendations for inclusive funding mechanisms and financial support programs that can help address that. But I'd say overall, the most important message from the toolkit on those challenges is that they're not insurmountable. We identified solutions and mitigation actions for each of the barriers, as well as case studies of best practice that can help overcome them and that people on these schools can learn from.
Thank you, Rebecca. And that would be the topic of a great follow-on webinar to emphasize the solutions. And it ties into sort of this next round of questioning. You know, Kezia, you mentioned, telling the story so that the next time, for example, local authorities are putting together a program for a visiting dignitary, they're aware of what women are doing in this space. They're aware that these are members of the community that they really want to shine a light on. And with that in mind, but the other part of telling the story, and I think you've all mentioned it in one form or another, and it's something that we also ran into when we launched Partnering for Climate, is many of the women who are involved in these activities, these are just things that they do in their normal lives. The water gathering, the stewardship of the land, the gardening, the agricultural practices that are regenerative and helping to rebuild soil productivity. They don't necessarily see them as nature-based solutions, and they don't see them necessarily as having links to value chains, having links to revenue streams. So how do you, in your circumstances, tell those stories so that, first of all, women themselves can see themselves in this nature-based frame, and secondly, so that the rest of your communities and your political leaders and your, banks and financial institutions and the others that are essential for women's access to resources see and become more and more familiar with women's roles here, which really goes to addressing that fundamental issue that, Rebecca, you mentioned, that blindness that seems to permeate in terms of the role of women and the opportunities and potentials of women in this space that we're trying to overcome. Sorry, Kezia, that's kind of a convoluted set of issues.
Thank you, Kerry. I can start. I think for us, the most important things is, and as Sarah said, NBS is a technical word is new, but then the way communities are engaging nature in solving their challenges has always been happening. So together with the communities, we sit down and really begin to break down these terms and help them to relate exactly with what they are doing. But most importantly, for them to understand that whatever they are doing is a nature-based solutions, or they are engaging nature in solving their challenges. And that to us is really, really important, because it helps to understand where the problem is coming from so that the solution could also work. Another thing we do is we build the capacity of the various communities we work with regards to gender responsive participation. And that just starts with the KDI team, the internal team, having to really understand what does gender responsive facilitation of community workshop, how does that look like? How do we engage in a manner that is gender representative in our work with the communities? But also we build the capacities of the various community groups we work with to begin to understand why is this gender conversation important in nature-based solutions and in development work. Because sometimes people assume and feel like, no, that is just an NGO term. We do it for the NGOs, but we try to break it down to them to help them understand why and how are women the vulnerable ones? How are they the ones who are suffering the most with the impacts of climate change? So when you sit down with communities and you have these conversations at their level, then it begins to make sense to them as why women should be even prioritized in this process, and not just women, but even the other groups that are underrepresented. Another thing that we do for most of the projects, when we start with the community, we do a call for proposals. for communities to apply for the project. And some of the things we look into in that process is this group, how are women involved in decision making, in their leadership structures? Are women part of those leadership structures? And when it not just on paper, but when you're meeting them, what are the roles of women? How are women engaging in that process? And even when they engage with the wider community, how do they value community? How are community members responding to the local initiatives they are having in the communities? Another thing is our team, the teams that implement the NBS projects are very inclusive. It includes both women and men. But it gets to a point where, for example, when you need to build the capacity of women or to empower them to actively participate in the construction process, which in most cases is viewed as a male dominated field. We build their capacities before the construction process. We encourage them that this is not just for men, but it is for all of us. It is for women as well. It is for the other genders as well. Because when it comes to income, everyone needs to have equal access to the income and the resources. And another thing is when we do our community engagement workshops, we do them at the time that is suitable for women. For example, we don't do it at a time when we know a woman is taking care of their children or is taking their children to school. So try to schedule the sessions at a time when we know the women have already sorted their caregiving issues and are available and will actively participate. Again, not taking their lunchtime when they should be providing for their children. You're not engaging them during those times, but also having workshop locations close proximity to their houses so that they don't have to come a long way. And if they need to go back and take care of their caregiving roles, then they have that opportunity to go back. Another thing is encouraging the participation of women. One of the ways we do this is the workshops we do or focus group discussions that we do, we break into groups, because sometimes if you do all in plenary, then you realize that the loudest in the room will be the one speaking. And in some cases, the male are the loudest. So we encourage by breaking out into groups of women where they actively participate. They feel comfortable. They feel like that is a safe space for them to share their needs, to share how the impacts of climate change, to share about how they feel about nature and how they feel with regards to even involvement and participation. Another thing is assigning them roles. For example, when we do construction, we create a committee that consists of construction manager, storekeeper. We divide this responsibility equally amongst men and women. And this is really important because it shows that it builds their capacity, but also raises their voices. And another thing with regards to now economic empowerment for the groups we work with, especially the women groups, when you're working with women groups, we encourage that they do a savings and loaning programs whereby they build a social network for themselves. And with this, they're also able to have support system, because we realize that women in most with the community, in the communities where we work, they value the support system in the neighborhood where they can stand for each other. They can generate income amongst each other. They can manage their finances amongst each other. And they can solve even welfare issues by just being together. So that kind of structure, we created together with them to help them sustain themselves, but also sustain the NBS initiatives. Another thing is assessing participation and just not viewing participation as bringing people in a room. Sometimes that is more of just ticking boxes. So not just engaging, not just consulting, but engaging. When you are having a session, you ensure you are getting, it's about co-creation. You're not just going to get ideas. And especially for women, you're not just going there to get their ideas, but co-creating solutions with them. So these solutions, we don't just bring solutions to the communities we work with, but we identify solutions, we have problems together, we identify solutions together. So that co-creations, and also assessing with regards to participation, how do we see the participation of women? Is there something we need to improve on? So for every engagement we do with the communities, we evaluate ourselves, and if there are rooms for improvement, we improve. Yeah, I think that's all from me. Thank you.
Great, Kezia. Thank you very much. Those are very practical, and I was astonished that while you were talking to us, you were also intuiting the spirit of the questions in the Q&A box, because they're really falling into two broad categories, and you've addressed a lot of these. One, how do we address challenges of women's access to land or resources in circumstances where they're actively prohibited or culturally prohibited from accessing them? And the second is, and you were addressing this, how do we address this burden that women face, this double burden, the reproductive and the productive burden, if we want to free up time for women to engage in nature-based solutions? How do we ensure that we're changing norms and practices so that they're not adding that on to an already overwhelming set of responsibilities? So we're going to pivot a little bit, Rebecca and Larissa, if you don't mind. I'm going to ask each of you to address one of those in your answer, and then if there's any other element quickly from the toolkit you want to emphasize, feel free. But Larissa, coming back to you, that question of how do we've identified that women need access to land, they need access to resources, but we've also very clearly identified that many women are operating in environments where these are very difficult things to achieve because of actual either legal or social or cultural practices. So what would you suggest to the audience members that are trying to get a sense around how to enable that particular element for women so that they can engage in this space?
Thanks, Carrie. I think, as I mentioned before during my talk, having women participating on those decision-making spaces is key. And then that's key, especially for shaping the regulatory and institutional framework where those decisions making are being made. So if we can include women and women leaders and representatives on those spaces, this is extremely important to shape these documents and also these governance arrangements in a way that's gender responsive. I also would say it's very important to work with women leaders and identify those key women in particular communities as also enablers of different approaches, different ways to approach land management. For example, in one of the projects I have been working on is a program called UK Pact that helps high emission countries to transition to a green growth and focus on climate mitigation. And nature is one of its key sectors. We have been working with an approach that identifies who are those influencers in communities who has this capacity of scale up approaches and knowledge, and often in the agriculture and forestry sectors, women are key community members on that, really also defending, land and property rights in those communities, and also scaling up different approaches. So, and the toolkit outlines that securing women's land and property rights to these, and legislative change can be a key way. That's a very quick answer to a very important question.
That's great. Thank you, Larissa. Rebecca, coming to you, as you'll see in the Q&A, again, there's a lot of emphasis on this fundamental reality that women face in terms of their various responsibilities and the unequal load within the household and within the community. I had the privilege of being able to visit one of our projects in Zimbabwe, where a local non-governmental organization had a very successful campaign to teach men to cook, so that the fathers and the brothers and the husbands in the family were increasingly keen on and interested in taking on some of the cooking responsibilities. That's not everything, far from it, but that's one sort of creative way that they tried to tackle this. So, you've already mentioned, Rebecca, that, women are already overrepresented in nature, biodiversity, natural resource management, but there's these clear challenges in terms of time poverty and the power dynamics. So what would you see as ways of countering this to get things started? And then I'll open this up to all of the panelists, and Sarah as well, if you want to jump in. I'll keep taking a look at the questions, but again, I think it really do fall into these two categories of how do we deal with the access to land and resources where there are prohibitions and time poverty. But then we'll also come back to issues of local knowledge. Go ahead, Rebecca.
Thank you, Kerry. Yes, I'm not surprised to see that there are a lot of questions around time poverty, caregiving responsibilities, and barriers to sharing voice and leading decision making. These are key barriers that need to be addressed and that we identified in the toolkit. So it's yes, feels fitting that this is coming out as questions from the audience too. And I think they really point to the importance of taking a more holistic approach and thinking also about how we're addressing gender norms in communities, about what social norms are at play, which we can start to identify through a gender or a JETI analysis. And there are various actions that people can take, ensuring that we're also engaging with men, not just focusing on women, but discussing caregiving and domestic tasks, discussing splitting these tasks more evenly, challenging some of these social norms and stigma that's in place, and to have workshops, to have campaigns, to have all these different pieces to counter discriminatory norms that position men as the only decision makers or as the only business leaders or community leaders in society, so that space is opened up for women and people from other socially excluded groups to engage and to lead more effectively and to have more time to be working on these pieces. And as you, Kerry, and as Larissa has said, it's also really useful to have people that can model this in society and to demonstrate that. So you can again work in partnerships with local civil society organisations to do that. And one other thing to say on this is that Kezia has also mentioned how projects can avoid adding additional pressure to this, by avoiding scheduling things at key times, by trying to have a bit more flexibility, maybe by doing things like offering a crash during some trainings and making sure that the necessary safeguarding and child protection pieces are in place. So it's also really important for people to be aware of those sorts of constraints and make sure that they're doing what they can to remove those barriers rather than to add to them. Thanks,
Great,
Kerry.
thank you. Look, I'd like to open this up to anyone else on the panel who might have additional ideas they'd like to share. Just sort of wave your hand and I'll call on you, starting with Kezia.
The issue about land is really interesting, and we were just discussing it with my colleagues the other day. And for example, in Kenya, it's cultural. It's not about legal issues about women access to land. And what we are saying is, for example, when it comes to inheritance, is empowering communities. And if there is that one person who is confident enough, is to just start and allocate your daughter's land. And what you are saying is it's something that may not change suddenly, but with time, people will see the sense. And having these dialogues with communities, bringing together communities to dialogue and reflect on, for example, if you have a daughter, they don't get married, and they're going to be, for example, in some cultures here, a daughter who is not married, when they die, they are buried outside the fence of the home. How would you feel as a father when that happens to your daughter? So bringing these conversations open, having dialogue, so that people really reflect on these cultures and norms, and slowly with time, things will change. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Anybody else want to come? Yes, sorry, Sarah, go ahead.
Maybe I can share some additional thought about traditional knowledge, because I think it's a very important question that was raised, because women in particular in indigenous and rural communities, they have a deep knowledge which is really place-based in relation to ecosystems, biodiversity, sustainable resources, and how to use them. So it's very important that this knowledge, is value is taken into account by practitioners working, so that it's not like a top-down approach on how nature-based solutions should be designed. But it's very important to take into account their knowledge. Also because not only in relation to nature-based solution, but there is evidence showing that when women are involved in designing, they design for inclusivity by default. So there is this instinct or for care, for inclusivity. So that by involving women is that they have knowledge about the local biodiversity and ecosystem brings additional benefits, because they bring the need also of society into the mix, into the design process. And of course, these are, in order to be implemented, first of all, there must be kind of a recognition of the importance of valuing local knowledge, indigenous knowledge into the design. So, and to do that, as we said several times, data are important, advocacy, sharing knowledge, education, because there is always the belief that something coming from outside is better than what is available on the site. So this misunderstanding is very important to be addressed. And of course, so there is knowledge that has to be created, and awareness at the same time, of course, better policies and regulation that give right of women to be involved in these decisions, right to the land, which, as Katia said, is a key topic, in particular like in Africa, that women have, I think, like only 5% of women own land in Africa. So of course there is then an entire ecosystem of interventions that need to be put in place. But yeah, definitely is an important knowledge that has to be valued, otherwise it will get lost over time. And then maybe just in addition to what Rebecca said on how to improve, to enable women to participate in this decision. I mean, I've been running many workshops across the globe involving also women, not necessarily nature-based solution, but in general. And what we work quite well was to, first of all, to schedule activities around their routine. That is very important. So the good understanding of local, routine, who are of course, the most women with better knowledge. That's why it's also important to engage women groups or cooperatives to be involved. And then also it's important to compensate their participation, to value their participation. You can do that in different ways. One way you can be also money compensation, or if it's not possible, actually to provide, as Rebecca said, some childcare support during the events. And then the moment you design nature-based solution for them, for real, then they will appreciate. And so in the next workshop, they will come with better availability. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you. I mean, there's another element that taps into all of the advice you've given in terms of engaging women at the outset, really doing your research. In my mind, there's sort of two worlds of nature-based solutions. There's the world where a donor comes in with an idea, agroforestry, beekeeping, something that women aren't necessarily already doing. And that's where a lot of these dynamics kick in. But the other is to meet women where they're at. Come in with an objective of working with women to support them in the nature-based solutions that they're already doing, that are already part of their lives, and see if we can better enable that, facilitate access to markets, help translate that into income streams that are slightly higher, while along the line doing everything to counter the other barriers or challenges they're facing in terms of gender-based violence, in terms of access to resources, in terms of time poverty and unequal distribution of care responsibilities in the household. So I think the toolkit and the knowledge that you've accumulated here really go a long way. But again, it's a question of telling these stories. So I just want to do a quick wrap up, 30 seconds each, if you don't mind, before we close out. To each of you, what is your key takeaway on how do we best tell the story of the importance of these linkages and the possibility, both again to the women themselves and to the community that will hopefully be supporting these initiatives, as sort of also a precursor to thinking how we continue to engage together as a community to tell the story of nature-based solutions. Kezia, let me start with you.
Thank you, Kerry. For me, the first thing and most important is to highlight the work that the women are doing, not just to the external world, but even to themselves. Let's showcase that what you are doing is really important, is addressing a issue that we are facing in the communities. It's showing value for nature. Yeah, so I think that's really important. But also, even as practitioners, as for us, it's also important to increase access to resources where we can. I think especially to women in the work that we do. How do we increase access to resources, but also increase participation of women, both in operations of NBS, but also in decision making for nature-based solutions? I think those are very important concepts for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Larissa.
Yeah, so it has been mentioned a lot here today as one of the most persistent challenges, the capturing, communicating the impacts of nature-based solutions led by women that resonate with both the funders and communities. I think for me, ultimately, is about telling the story of nature-based solutions beyond data, so centering on the voices of those that are most affected and ensuring their knowledge shape the solutions we scale up. So we all know about the challenge. We know data and having disaggregated data that really capture and is analyzed through a gender lenses is difficult, but we're seeing good examples and positive initiatives in terms of, strengthening capacity building so that local partners and different teams can interpret those data, and also having monitoring evaluation frameworks that include those indicators. So I think the tools are out there to support practitioners. This toolkit is a fundamental for that. And I think now is how we really implement to enable those stories to be told and more knowledge should be disseminated so our solutions are better qualified as well.
Thank you. Rebecca.
Thank you. Yes, I'd agree with everything that's been said so far. To tell these stories, we need to be using the evidence that we already have around effective and inclusive nature-based solutions. And we need to be working in partnership with the women-led MBS entrepreneurs themselves, so that we're reaching not only the donors and programmers who can support this work, but also women who might be interested in joining the sector or expanding their work on nature-based solutions. And Kezia mentioned earlier that women are often the ones doing this work, but not the ones that are invited to meet VIPs or to showcase their contributions. So I think we also need to be amplifying their work and their voices on.
Great, thank you. Sarah, has it all been said, or did you want to add something?
No, I mean, I think a key takeaway is that there is a need to work at different levels. There is not only one way of finding the solution. So it's not one stakeholder who has the magical key to solve that. It's very important to have an holistic approach to understand, as we try to do with this toolkit, what are the key challenges, the barriers, and then identify what are the solutions, the intervention point for each of them. So these are holistic at the same time, rooted on the ground. So the understanding of what is happening there, what is working, what is not working, so the engagement of women is so important. And then again, there is a lot of knowledge about nature-based solutions, and not enough about gender responsive nature-based solution. So it's very important to be meaningful and to intentionally collect data that are gender disaggregated, that show how this intervention actually generate benefits, in particular for an economic point of view, because unfortunately that's what most of the investors, donors understand as a language. So we need to show the economic benefit of these interventions, but at the same time, all the environmental and social benefit that can be generated. And lastly, of course, the involvement of women in key decision-making position, and not only in doing things, but deciding things, because they have a huge impact on their daily life.
All right, and with that, I'd like to thank you all. I'd like to thank our panelists and Sarah for contributing your time and ideas during this webinar. And I'd also like to thank all of the other organizations and contributors from Arup and SDD and from the many other individuals and organizations that supported this initiative. In particular, I'd like to give a shout out to Ella Duffy, from the DCED Secretariat for Ella's support, for her contributions, and especially for her patience along the way. This has been a long journey. And finally, my thanks to all of you in the viewing audience for your excellent questions, for your comments, for your engagement in this issue, and for being part of this coalition of the willing that are going to try to get the message out and continue to support women and nature-based solutions in this very essential space. As Ella has mentioned in the chat, we will be following up with all of you who registered by email to share the recordings and the slides. And I would encourage all of you to help disseminate the toolkit and its key messages widely. And don't hesitate to reach out to our panelists if you have follow-up that you would like to pursue after the event. So with that, au revoir, and I wish you all the best.